Awesome. Yeah, this is, so we have Eric Greenwald with us. He's also a content creator and realtor and police officer and entrepreneur and father and property flipper. What else?
That's good enough.
You're pretty good?
Yeah.
Vending machine
owner. Yeah. That's about
entrepreneur. So we are going to have like these, I should say, and, but I was going to say, and you've created content and done different things to where, I'm going to move this a little bit here, to where, it's just royalty-free tracks. Like just Google royalty-free tracks. And so I found a good royalty-free track.
Sounds good. It fits.
Yeah, it does. I'm not a huge lover of country music, so it's kind of funny that I picked that, but it's very Flagstaff.
It fits the West, the Flagstaff area.
And we always make the joke that time flies here. You and I actually, and I have so many questions. I just have so many questions, so we're going to get into so many different things here. But you had brought we thought we'd just open on air here, that you and I had a perseverance moment. Push that, at least I saw it that way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We set out a goal and
8 months of perseverance.
Yeah.
And I think that's important in the real estate market right now, that people know, like, hey, things don't just, and we as consumers, I tangent all the time on this thing, so bring me in here. But we as consumers, and that's why I think the pandemic threw us all off, in the sense of we just want to say, hey, I want this, I can afford this, I'm going to get this. And that doesn't work in the housing market right now.
No. And each situation's unique too, right? And I think this last transaction that we did together shows the importance of having those connections locally, because we were looking, stopped looking again, and then, it happened, and it happened quick.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think, and we'd have to ask, HIPAA doesn't apply to this. Brett, good old Brett. We'll go first names only.
Yeah.
We'd have to ask Brett, but I think, I don't know, what you toured the house with them more. I was really excited about this one that they actually got. Does this fit their needs better than the other one?
100%. And that's what was great about it.
He was picking up chickens. he couldn't have gotten chickens where he was looking before.
And there was never a talk of chickens or animals or anything before this. And then when we showed up to look at the property the initial time, there were 10 goats, a llama, geese, a turkey, and it was like, oh, this fits, And so you could tell from the beginning, they saw the house, there was interest right away, and then I get a text message later that afternoon, hey, can we go see it again later this afternoon with the kids? So I knew right then, like this was a special. And, I think for the size of the family, their needs, it was perfect. And hopefully it stays that way for a long time for them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, and we do get into like the kumbaya of real estate a lot on this, where it's just like, it's belief of like, hey, we're putting the right effort in and having the goal, and sure, there's some distractions and delays, and and there was like a head down moment where like you and I didn't talk to him about, or that family about real estate for probably like 5 months, really heavily.
Yeah. Once they kind of got settled in, not into a house, but renting.
Yeah.
I was like, they got a lot going on right now. They just need some time to just get adjusted to Flagstaff before, I don't like to be that pressure kind of salesman guy anyways. Yeah. And so I was kind of just reading the room, and it felt like, they need some time with the holidays and all that. And then, let's start it back up and see what we can do for this time around in this current market now. And maybe we have to do something different or look at different ideas and properties. And I think it was the second one we looked at this year, and it was just, it worked.
Hit. And I think that's the hard part for a lot of people right now is they, and I come up with terrible analogies on these things too. It's like that dating analogy where it's like hot, cold. And it's like, that's hard in life to do with a real estate plan, where you're like, okay, now we're really in the market. Now we're going to go out, and we've gone out a couple weekends, and we just want to make this happen. And this was the house, and then it didn't happen. And you can't keep that same pace and energy for long term. You kind of have to say, okay, we can't just be ready, willy-nilly to go for 6 months on end. You kind of have to say, okay, let's really, for the next 6 to 8 weeks, try and get after it. And then, let's chill out for a little bit, passively watch, or be ready to go that weekend that it hits, or, it's, I don't know. How do you help people manage that?
I think honestly, you just need to really understand what it is your buyers or your sellers need and what they want, right? Yeah. And each situation is going to be completely different. So you can't go into each situation with a buyer and, do the same game plan because they're looking for something different. They have different needs, different timelines. So again, you just have to read what it is that they're looking for and try to make that best adjustment towards them, because you just don't know when that right opportunity might come along. And so for me, a lot of times when I'm talking to my clients, especially on the buyer side, because for some reason I've been on a lot of the buyers lately. Yeah. It's figure out exactly what it is that you want. Let's narrow this thing down. And I'm a big proponent of let's look at as many properties as we can, because you're going to help kind of narrow what it is you like, what you don't like. And it's much easier for me to look at properties and kind of evaluate, is this going to be a good one based on your absolute do not want, or your absolute, this is something that we won't accept, whether, whatever that case may be. I would much rather know that than know 15 things that you do like,
Sure. Well, and really boiling down, and that's the funny thing is, I think, just like you're saying, is it's almost a game of psychology where you have to help people understand, and maybe it's not really apparent where they know out the gate. That's what I think the hard part is like a lot of times out the gate, they're not telling you or me, hey, this is a break point, right? And that's where we try and communicate as a team, because I'll have some clients say like, this monthly payment is a break point. I was like, well, you shouldn't be going looking at that high of a house out with your agent, because I know the garage was perfect. She loved the master closet and everything was perfect, but we're going to come down to this break point. So what are we doing?
Right. And a lot of times when I talk with even friends and coworkers who are thinking about selling, or we're thinking about buying maybe within the next year or so. And I said, okay, well, you need to know your numbers more than anything. So you need to talk to a lender right away. Just because you talk to a lender doesn't mean like all of a sudden now you have to buy, right? Like like, okay, now I have to buy within the next,
it should be educational and discovery.
Right. But if you know that $2,000 a month is our absolute max, okay, well, talk to a lender. What does that price range put you at? Based on your current situation financially. And then you can kind of say, okay, well, if our max budget based on that monthly payment is $500,000, now let's look at houses in that price range. And is that the house that we want to get into? Or now you might realize quickly, you know what, like we can make our house work, or we have equity in our house. Maybe we can, convert a bedroom or add a bedroom or whatever the case may be, because a lot of times you just kind of get caught up on Zillow, Realtor.com, and you're like, oh, this would be great. Or I think I could swing $2,600 a month, and then you start looking at the numbers and you're like, man, I don't think that's going to work.
No.
And you just wasted a lot of time, a lot of energy. And like you said, it's all psychological. Like it is all psychological.
And a lot right now.
Like I said, each family and situation is different. So you have to learn what are those things that might make or break that opportunity for them.
Exactly.
And work around that.
Exactly. No, it's a game that I'm not really jealous of. I've said this multiple times on this, that I'm not really jealous of the games that people have to play with their minds and markets and things. Cause case in point, Silicon Valley Bank, right? I'm not an expert on what happened there, but I do know that pretty simple, or I trust the experts telling me that if people keep their money in the bank stays alive. If people psychologically fear their fear created their reality of, hey, we're all going to draw money out, and then the bank fails, right? The run on the bank causes the bank to fail, right? And so, this is not a large conversation about like our systems and the fissures and cracks and that. We're not going to go into that, but it is interesting where we do manifest our own realities sometimes, right? And for a lot of people to say, hey, this is not the best of times, I get it, but I'm going to psychologically understand how markets are going to shift, how that's going to change opportunity, what's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? You are showing what the worst case scenario right now, right? As far as like where interest rates are at, right? I don't know on house prices.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, no,
and so I think, in this day and age,
social. I'm not going to go back and cut that, but yeah.
No, but I this day and age where you're just bombarded with national headlines, right? Like when COVID hit, initially everyone was trying to figure out what was going on, but it was like the market's going to crash, right? Mm-hmm. And if you would have listened to the national headlines, that would have been a terrible time to buy a house.
Yeah.
Look back 3 years later and you're like, man, I wish I would have bought every property that I could have.
Yeah.
And now in the last year or so, the national headlines are like housing crash is coming, economy crash is coming, get out of everything, sell everything. And it's like, not necessarily. And each market is different, right? Yeah. And we know that the Flagstaff market is so unique.
Yep.
Even within the state of Arizona, not even considering national. Yeah. So again, that's why I'm always like, hey, let's talk. You have a question, like, let's talk about it. Like if you can talk to me as a realtor and I'm not, going to feel like I'm going to force you into selling your house or buying a house or, going to be calling you every day because now you said you had thoughts of buying or selling. But
yeah,
I think you really need to know what the local market is doing because Flagstaff is so unique and it's such an isolated geographical area that it doesn't follow a lot of the trends even within the state.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that a lot of people lose sight of, and I've seen different calculations on like, oh, should you really buy or rent your real estate? And, we have this increasingly, especially, watching things on the news and there's this like increasingly like, oh, do you really need to own things? Like just Uber around and like, as you're thinking through things and there is a clear argument to renting certain things, right? Like, hey, renting a boat, probably not a bad idea. Right. Right?
Yeah.
Coming from the guy that's spent way too much money on boats. But like, but the thing that people don't think of is the opportunity cost of housing, right? When it's like, okay, what are you making that decision? If you're squabbling over, like, and I've got to be careful with numbers here, because I don't want to like alienate audience or anything. But if it's like, hey, the seller wants $5,000 more, right?
Right.
$5,000 more. And you're like, shoot, that's my line in the sand. Not going to do it. Like, well, $5,000 more in your loan, assuming you can qualify for it, is going to be about $25 a month more, right? Assuming you finance that. What's your opportunity cost on $25 a month? And where's your landlord going to go with your lease in 6 months from now? I had a client who was like, this has got to be, he was, and like, I know you're not representing the police department here.
Right.
And so, but Eric does have a legal background, everyone. And he's probably, do you have like a black belt in something? No? Okay.
Just a jack of all trades.
Fair enough.
A white belt in everything.
He can scrap. Are you kind of the scrappy guy? Like the scrapper, like people will look at you and they're like, not that you don't look like extremely intimidating.
Scrap like fighting?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
No.
I'm a lover, not a fighter.
Okay. Just talk him down.
Exactly. It's so much easier.
Okay. Fair enough.
A lot less paperwork.
Okay. Yeah. So there's so many different directions because I'd be excited to hear how that goes into your real estate. But I said this guy was in a neighborhood in Flagstaff and he all of a sudden got a notification. He's probably under market rents by like $400 and his landlord's going up from market rents.
Tough spot.
And so he's increasing in like several months from now, he's increasing by $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
$1,000 a month. And that's where I kind of like, he was asking, as we're talking through this, I'm like, in my perspective, I'm not licensed to talk about leases and things, but I was like, from just knowing Flagstaff, you're probably a little under. And then he's going now over.
Right.
It's not illegal.
No.
After your lease expires, you can do whatever you want.
But like, we talked about that idea that goes around of, not owning a car, not owning a house. Yeah. But there's a lot of risk and stability with that, especially if you have kids. I have a friend who's renting and has been renting for several years, and he's jumping to house each year. And again, the rents are going up and it's a stressful time. Am I going to be able to find a rental?
Yeah.
If I can't find a rental, are we going to have to move out of Flagstaff and, have kids in school? And, so I don't know. I'm a firm believer in the stability part of it.
Absolutely.
I could see it maybe if you're in a larger city like a New York, LA or something where it's a little bit easier to do that. But, for me, being a family guy with 2 kids, I wanted the stability, and I'm looking more in long term with my, real estate rather than, 5-year term limits and, having to juggle with different landlords, different houses. Just the move in itself is expensive.
Yeah. And that's just talking monetarily. I hate moving.
Oh yeah.
I hate moving.
Yeah.
And it's also bad because I'm cheap and I'm terrible at asking for help. Like if I was like drowning in a pool and like, hey Chris, do you need a hand? I'd be like, no, I got it, until I'm like gluing at the bottom and then I might wave like, Eric, I need a little help.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at that. Like it was kind of funny. We helped, we happened to be on vacation. I have family up in Utah. We were helping my little brother move. And my wife was like, this is weird. Like we didn't do this moving day. Like it was like, hey, this is the day he got keys and we were there unloading U-Hauls for him and everything. And she's like, wait, we didn't do this. I was like, no, I just like over a 3-week period of time, just brought trailer after trailer after trailer and unloaded it myself, and called once because I couldn't move a bed frame myself.
Yeah. And just put that burden on yourself and just be exhausted at the end.
Yeah. I moved and I brag about it now, but it's not something to brag about. Like a full-on dual French door refrigerator in a box. Cause when did I do this? No, it was this was 10 years ago. So I was probably stronger then. But I moved it into a U-Haul by myself, like up a ramp.
And that's good until you drop it or you just cost yourself $3,000 or.
No, we'll talk about, I have, share this story.
Oh,
that's because I don't know how to ask help.
Was that like a.
Oh, we were moving a large.
Accident?
No,
Oh.
People think that we were moving a kid's playhouse on a Sunday morning, and my wife was like, "Go get the neighbors," and it was her my in-laws pushing on the other end. I was like, "Nah, we got this figured out," and I pinched my thumb under it, and it was on the ground. Okay, sorry, morbid. So anyhow, but let's so we reel this back in. But you've done, what you're talking about, like owning things and having stability. You've done a lot of creative things though. And so in trying to seek the best, I don't know, why have you done a lot of the things that you've done?
I think I've always liked trying to do extra things. I'm always working hard. I like working. I like staying busy. I feel like I'm more productive the busier I am.
Okay.
And that's at a fault sometimes, and I'm learning over the last couple of years. I'm really learning to kind of narrow that focus and energy.
Yeah.
But my dad, my family's blue collar. I'm born and raised in Michigan. So, my dad always did little side hustles here and there. And so I was like, I like to make a little extra cash if I can. If I could do something and make a quick $50 or something, whatever it might be. Yeah. I'd rather do that than just sit around and watch TV. So I don't know. And it's kind of grown into businesses and real estate. And now I'm letting go a lot of those things. And I'm forcing myself to kind of focus on the more, I guess, important things, or the things that provide the bigger bang for my buck and time and energy. So, but it's just always fun to me.
Kind of deeper versus wider.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the quote, "Don't do more, be more."
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to use that in the last year or so to say, okay, don't do all these little things that, make $100 here, $50 there, put your time and energy into something that's going to actually pay off and move the needle a little bit more.
Sure.
And that's why I kind of got into the real estate thing over the last 3 years.
You've been in real estate for 3 years now?
Almost 3 years. I've had my license. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going fast.
It is going fast. How long have you been with Realty Execs?
That whole time.
The whole time?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew Wayne. Wayne actually helped us buy our house in 2008. And we've always kept a relationship with Wayne, and he's one of those guys that's just, you always want to have a conversation with him and Big Dave. I mean, they know everything that's going on in Flagstaff, you know? And
I don't know how, like, he has his ear to the ground.
Yeah. And so we used to, you know, before I ever even thought of getting into real estate, we would love to just meet up with Wayne, you know, every few months and have lunch, and we'd be like, hey, so what's going on here? What business is going in here? You know? And so when I was looking to get my license, you know, I'm a police officer working full time. And so I was kind of in that weird situation of, I'm going to have my license, but I can't go all in, right? Like I still have a lot of other commitments. And so I just reached out to Wayne to say, hey, I need some guidance, you know, of what would be your recommendation with me kind of taking on this venture? And we talked, and he was like, I would love to have you at Realty Executives. And, you know, it was an honor. I didn't expect that going in. And I'm just grateful that he allowed me that opportunity, and it's been great. And it's been a great, you know, team. And I can't say enough about it.
Yeah. Super, super good shop. But let's rapid fire a little real quick to make good use of your time on it, to where let's list all the side gigs
that I currently do and that I've done before.
that you've done, period. Okay. So let's hear it out. What have y'all done?
You know, one of the things I used to do a lot was I would just go around when bulk trash day and like Ponderosa Trails and that, because people throw away amazing things.
Yeah.
And I would just grab stuff, put it on Craigslist, and make $25, $50, $100, you know? So I did that a lot just because it was
eBay at all, or just Craigslist?
Just Craigslist. Keep it local, you know? I don't, you know, because it's mostly like dog kennels, barbecue grills, couches, you know, those type of things. I'm like, I'll make a quick $100, you know? Like, I love it. I just got to pick it up, put it in my truck, take it to my house, wipe it down, and take a picture of it. And usually within a day or two, just cash in my hand.
There you go.
So we did, you know, I've done that for a long time. My wife and I opened an escape room business in 2017.
Okay.
So we own Flagstaff Escape Space.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so it was over by, right next to Grand Canyon Brewery.
Okay. Yeah.
There's an escape room business there now, but that's the spot that we were in.
Okay.
So we opened that in 2017. We closed in the summer of COVID in 2020 because locking people in a room for an hour with COVID, you know, it's just like, like
pandemics.
Yeah. And we ran that business debt free, and we were like, we don't really want to go into debt to try to make this work. Right. Because we were both still working our full-time jobs. So we did that. I did a dog waste collection business in the winter of 2020.
Okay.
I think that was more, once we opened the escape room business, we had never opened a business before.
Okay.
And there was such a learning curve to that, right? Like, how do you do this? How do you do that? Like, and you just figure it out. Yeah. And once we did that and we ran a good business. Yeah. I was like, okay, this is not that hard. Like, I can start a business now and do it within a week. Yeah. With $500 or less, and let's see what happens. So that was kind of that thing. It was just like, oh, I could do this. I like listening to podcasts, reading books. And so I'm one of those people that like gets an idea and I'm like, I want to do that. I want to try that. Sure. So that became successful enough to where it was to the point where I was going to have to hire people to do it. Okay. And that's kind of where I started my realization of, I'm stretching myself too thin here, right? Like, I'm taking time away from...
You didn't want to be the king of the puppy poop?
I didn't want to manage people. I don't mind picking up dog waste. Like, that doesn't bother me. I've got 2 dogs, you know, and we're fostering a dog.
So it's more so the scale needed to operate.
It was where I could have gone out and done that every day of the week. And now it's like, okay, now I'm taking time away from my real estate, because that's right kind of the same time I got my real estate license. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, where do I want my future to be? Yeah. You know? And so it was like, I could scale this business, or even if I continued to do it all myself, the amount of time and energy that I put into that for a year, if I just did one more real estate deal, I would trump that whole year in the dog waste business 3-4 times what I did in a whole year. Yeah. And I just didn't want to get into managing people. Yeah. I mean, That's what it was. So
No,
I just closed the business. I was just like, I'm done. I didn't want to try to sell it. It was just like, I'm done, you know? I have vending machines.
Okay.
I started with like the small candy gumball machines.
Yep.
And I started that probably 4 years ago because my kids were early teenagers. And I was like, this is a good way to bring them on a board and teach them business.
Yeah.
And they were all about it, you know, picking out candy, going, collecting quarters, you know, you're counting quarters. It's fun.
Yeah.
And, you know, then they got too cool for that. And it was just on me to do that. Last week, I sold the rest of my candy machines. So I'm out of the small candy business.
Okay.
But I do have 2 large vending machines in a location here in Flagstaff. I had 2 more down in a location in Sedona, but I ended up selling those because, again, it was, you know, well, you know about driving to Sedona. Like
all too well.
You're like, oh, it's only a 45-minute drive, and then it becomes a burden. You know,
I'll say, and I do like to throw people under the bus on this podcast, but especially those I love most. But the canyon's still beautiful to me. My wife struggles with the canyon. No, she still loves the scenery, but it's like, that drive never gets old to me, but the time does.
Yeah, it's like, man, I need a whole day or half a day. You know, for me to go down and service 2 vending machines, you know, it's 45 minutes down, 45 minutes there, 45 minutes back, you know, and I've got so much other things going on. I was like, it's not worth my time and energy. Yeah. And so I ended up selling those. I still have 2 more here in Flagstaff.
It's worth your while?
Yeah. You know, I probably net $400 to $600 a month.
Wow.
Yeah. So for that, I'm like, man, that's a good rental property.
How often do you have to? Yeah. How often do you have to refill?
Every 10 days to 2 weeks.
So you're like, probably have, I mean, not talking startup energy and everything, but now on a maintenance basis, you're putting 3 to 4 hours in it a month.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So eventually I'll sell those too, because it's just like an added thing for me to do. But for right now, I'm like, man, that one's doing better than my long-term rental property down in Phoenix right now. And it was, you know, a fraction of the startup cost. So,
candy real estate. You own some candy real estate.
Yeah. So
is it beverage or candy or both?
One's a drink machine. One's a candy machine.
Okay.
Or like candy and chips and snacks. And,
snack diversification.
Yeah. And I just buy it at Sam's Club and Walmart and go fill it up. And it does good.
That's super cool. Okay, so the vending, the dogs, the what's the first? Oh, the escape room.
Escape room.
What else?
The bulk trash.
Oh, the bulk trash. Yes, the bulk trash.
That one's still fun to me. I don't know why. It's like a treasure hunt.
Yeah, I used to enjoy that stuff more.
Yeah.
Like, especially like my brother did it more too. It was like, and he had more of a skill set. Like he'd buy, and when people, like one man's trash is another man's treasure, and he'd find, especially specifically, he'd find motorcycles where it's like, hey, someone's just tired with this thing, and this is like $100 and some elbow grease. Yeah. And now the thing's worth twice as much. He would do more of that stuff. Or he'd buy these like sporty bikes that he really shouldn't be driving. And then like, you know, he did get in a crash. I think, did he? I don't know. But yeah, he'd get in trouble on him and then sell it. So it's just his way of going through stuff. You always, there's people. So is it ever, do you ever like fix and refurb stuff, or is it more so just spit clean, polish and sell it?
Like one year I was crushing it with barbecue grills.
I love it.
And I would just pick them up, take them to my house, wash them in the front yard with some dish soap, take a picture of it, and it was like anywhere from $50 to $200, you know? And I don't know. I mean, for some people, like it's not worth my time. Like $200 doesn't do anything, but I don't know. Maybe it's still like the blue collar in me and growing up. Like $200 is $200. Like, you know,
I am very much that way on a lot of. Well, for the most part, on it to where, I grew up mowing lawns. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that I look at a lot of my brain was programmed that way of like, oh, I can run this. I can schedule me. I can get the job done. I can work with my clientele and I can create that income and that flow. And if I want to be mowing for 5 hours on a Saturday and mow 2 lawns, or go 5 hours on a Saturday and mow 10 lawns.
Yeah.
That's me. Right. And kind of learn that true value of getting out of that clock in, clock out mentality. And I think that that's where, I don't know, I think that that's where a lot of people that hit that shift. And it's so critical, where if you're just clocking in, clocking out, and, you know, that's maybe a level 1, level 2 is saying, hey, you're really invested during those hours that you're clocked in and clocked out. You've done a lot of things prior to, of either schooling or experience and things where you are valuable during that time. Well, that's awesome, right? And I think that's where hopefully most people get to, at least at level 2. Level 1 doesn't survive you in Flagstaff, right? You got to be at least valuable during those hours. But then that last piece of like, well, what can you create that's not even time assigned?
Right. And that's
right, because you can pick up as many pieces of grills and trash and bulk trash, but like you
can't scale that.
Well, no, you can, but that's what I'm saying is it's like, it's not a matter of time. It's not saying you're trading time. Like, hey, you're no matter what, you're just going to make the same amount. It's like, no, now you're gaining a skill set. You're understanding, you're scanning the curb, you're understanding what could be valuable.
Collecting couches, or you're paying someone to collect grills. Like, it's not the passive income route,
Well, and that's maybe like a different level, but what's passive? Right? You and I were talking. Yeah. So when we dive into, you've done property renovations, and flips.
Got 2 going on right now.
Okay, got 2 going on right now. Yeah. I've enjoyed watching, just because I enjoy that others feel my pain when you're in the thick of it, and it looks like but you're smarter than me on several of these, because you contract a little bit more out than maybe I do.
Yeah, so I have a friend of mine who is a realtor in Phoenix, and that's kind of what he does. He works mostly just with investors, wholesalers, rehabbers, investors, and so he manages the rehab for me. I have him sell it. One of them actually just hit the market last week.
Cool.
So he sells it for me, so then I can pay him through that. Mm-hmm. And then when I do get the opportunity to go down and do some work, like I like to do that because I want to learn more hands-on DIY stuff. I'm pretty skilled in that, I think, but I'm not at contractor level.
Sure.
So, but yeah, I probably do 2% of the work. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
And so that's good and bad that I've learned, because I wish I had a little bit more hands-on control of it. Yeah. And when I'm investing in Phoenix 2 hours away, it's just not feasible, right? It's just
sure.
It'd be much more easier if that property was in Flagstaff or on the same street that I was, that I could go over there and just, hammer out some more work and move things along, because it's frustrating when you go to the property and it's in one condition and you go 3 weeks later and it looks like nothing's been done.
That's one of my hardest parts. This is a complex topic for me, just because being kind of that blue collar mindset, where I'll oftentimes be like, okay, not that I don't totally respect the trades and respect that they can do it a lot of times better than me.
Yeah.
Right. But I will say one thing is, as you look at the trades, is they also, right. Like my flooring guy is amazing. Has been doing flooring for 35 years. He doesn't lay the flooring, right? He's the guy doing the quote, the bid, the estimate, and then they have someone else, an employee, then coming in. And I love, in my relationship with him is good, and I appreciate that, where it's like, hey, whatever the employee does, because I've seen different employees on different properties we've done, but I know that Leroy has my back, and he'll come and fix it. And he'll explain that to me sometimes of, this was just a little more complex than, 3 or 5 years of tile work gets you. This is what 35 years of tile work gets you, and he makes it right. But that's where sometimes I'm like, I don't know, if this guy's only been doing 3 to 5 years, and I can watch a couple YouTube videos, and by the time I'm halfway down with the house, and the fact that it's moving, I get in a lot of trouble with just wanting things moving.
And yeah, that's how I am too.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard giving up some of that control. And I think you and I are very similar, where, I will work, 14-hour days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday at my property.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely
the demise of your own happiness.
Yeah. And I'm definitely not as skilled. I'm definitely not as efficient, but I feel like it's getting done.
Yeah.
And for some reason we got into doing flips the last 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And I think after we finish these last 2 properties, we're going to go back into more buy and hold. And that was kind of where our initial goal was. And for some reason we got into flips where it's hard to walk away from, large sums of money when the opportunity presents itself. And the market kind of has presented that where, you can get in and these property values are continuing to go up.
Yeah.
The market's good. There's a lot of buyers out there. So it's fit. But I kind of also wish that during that time, I would have bought a couple properties for long term at 3% interest rate or.
Yeah. Yeah. Hindsight's always 20/20.
I know.
So I'm curious, and I get this question a lot. And a lot of people are highly interested in kind of the exact same ways that we boiled into this of like, hey, there's value to being entrepreneurial in life. And then there's a value to finding things that are more bang for your buck. And real estate is definitely one of those. It's high risk, high reward, big swing. It's not like we're, your revenue is not like the amount of, soda cans going through your machines.
Right.
It's kind of like you said, the 1 or 2 flips this year versus how many cans you're going through in a vending machine. So it's definitely playing at a different level.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of people ask me like identifying opportunity. And so when you're talking about these specific flips and you said you have kind of a partner down the valley, do they specifically just identify these opportunities for you? Or what are things that you look at when you're saying, hey, this could be a decent opportunity on that flip? To where, it's not unlike your barbecue grill scan of like, hey, this has potential.
Yeah, this is a $50 barbecue grill.
But yeah, that's the hard part is saying, hey, is the price right and nice and low, but at the same time, and that's kind of what we caught ourselves into on this last round. Experience gets experience here of like, this was the oldest home that we had ever done in Sedona. And so like in 1970s home, you have a lot of different challenges than something that's even 10 or 15 or 20 years newer. So there's a lot of things that you just don't understand where it's not.
For us, we rely a lot on the guidance of my partner down in Phoenix because that's what he does every day. Yeah. And the first house that I bought sight unseen, just maybe 10 pictures online. Okay. And, almost had a heart attack when I walked into the house. It didn't even have a floor. Oh, you opened the door and it was dirt? A 2-foot drop down to dirt. Oh, yeah. And I'm like, what did I do? But he had done properties like that before. Okay. And so that's why I put the trust in him and it worked out. And so there's never a perfect deal. And I think so many people just have analysis paralysis. They see what they see on HGTV, DIY network, and they think, oh, I can do this. But there's definitely, it's definitely a game changer when you have that money and you take that risk because there's risk, right? You wouldn't have a financial gain if there wasn't risk or else everyone would do it. Absolutely. And so I think even, whether it's doing a flip, buying an investment property, or even buying a house, when the real dollars, your own dollars, are involved, it's a different feeling. You can watch a HGTV show and like, oh my God, we got to replace the plumbing, and that's $10,000, and you're like, $10,000 doesn't seem that bad. They're investing $120 into it. Sure. But when that $10,000 is your own, and you're $120,000 of your own budget, it's a different feeling. Even now there's a lot of nights where I'm up in the middle of the night and I'm like, what are we doing? Or is this going to be okay? And so far everything's worked out. Yeah. I'm willing to take that risk. I'm still in a low enough financial position where I have to take those risks, and I'm willing to. You and I are probably in this very similar position. We don't have millions of dollars in the bank where we can just buy cash, and if it doesn't work out, it's not a big deal. Yeah. When you're starting out and you're building your portfolio and you're trying to, build wealth, like you have to take risk. at the beginning. And we're still kind of in that stage until we can kind of build, either financials where we're comfortable in going in on cash on a property, or, the risk of one property isn't detrimental if it were to go completely belly up.
Yeah. No, and I think that's where, I don't know, as you're talking through that, I don't think a lot of things, I don't know if they really will change though, right? You're just taking risks at different levels. And then just like you're talking, I always saw like life as different equations early on in this career of like, cause I had this front row seat to the way that a lot of people make it through life financially. And again, like we talked about those different things of someone just clocks in, clocks out, or someone gets highly educated and clocks in, clocks out, right? And knowing, okay, we can all understand very clearly like the dollar for dollar, or the hour for dollar. Let's do that. The hour for dollar time of like a doctor versus a car mechanic. No offense to car mechanics, is just different. We value that societally different.
Police officer.
Yeah, or a police officer, right? And so having to understand that value in that assignment, and then knowing that as you're talking about then creating different streams and avenues of income, that it's, and you walk into a property that just has dirt, to someone else, that's a no factor. It's not a problem. They understand that calculated risk.
Right. So
it's not even a blip on their radar. Like, oh, no floor, no problem. Right. Whereas you're like, hey, I got to call someone. I got to do this. Like, what's this going to cost? What's this going to look like? And they're like, no. And that's kind of where I was just on the line with a client on this type of same factor of like, and I don't say this like with bravado or anything, to say like there was an investment property I was looking to purchase, and was very friendly with the owner and was working things out. Every other transaction I've ever done has been with a real estate agent. This one was a good buddy of mine. So I was like, no, we can work this out. And we did. And I hadn't even been in the property until after closing.
Yeah.
Right. Because I looked at the home inspection. I knew the square footage. I knew what it could rent for. I knew what my mortgage payment was. I'm like, nothing else matters. Just like you're saying, if it's like, oh no, if you would have walked in, you would have saw that it really needs a new paint job. Well, I knew the numbers. I was willing to risk saying, okay, I'm going to have to fix certain things. And, up to a certain threshold, I'm pretty comfortable with the risk.
Yeah. And when you're starting out, you either have to, I think when you're starting out, it's much easier to find someone who has experience in that, right? Yeah. And you put your trust in that person rather than the trust necessarily into the deal and you finding that deal.
Yeah.
And that's where I kind of started out. But the more you do it, the more you understand, and the more people that you work with, you realize that there's many different ways to see a project through.
Yeah.
For the last 2 properties we bought, I never walked through them. Didn't have a home inspection. We used a private lender. I got pictures of it like on a Thursday, and we closed on Tuesday. It's just because the opportunity was there, and I had experience in doing this before. And, there's risks, obviously, but I'm willing to take those risks, and that's where we're at.
Yeah. And it almost to me is like, it reminds me when I was talking with this guy was a helicopter mechanic, and I loved his analogy once when he was talking about things, and he's like, I used to, when I was fixing things, like I used to always have to look up, it's like the tensile strength or like the breaking strength of certain metals and materials and bolts and things. Like I used to have to look that up. And he's like, but after a certain point, I just knew.
Yeah.
Like I had the experience to just know. And yes, that can get you in trouble. You gotta be careful, right? Of like that sixth sense that like, oh, this is totally a good buy. Like, no, the devil's in the details. It doesn't excuse due diligence. But there is something, and I appreciate that. I feel like just because this is something I do day in, day out, like the opportunities I've identified, at least so far, so good, right? Is that it's like, oh, you look at a couple different factors, you know what you're looking at, and that you're able to say, hey, all the rest. And what's interesting too is that you and I deal with the majority of clients we deal with are buying like one house every 8 years.
Yeah.
Like, and so I get that they're like, hey, I got to dot all these I's and cross all these T's. And it's like, to me, like 95% of the I's and T's you're crossing don't matter.
Right.
And it's important, and I get it. I'm not trying to be insensitive, and that's where I always have to like exercise patience in the transaction and everything of just knowing like, no, everyone doesn't do this as frequently as you and I do this. But that knowing like what makes or breaks a real estate opportunity are really probably like, less than 5 things.
Yeah. To go back, it's psychological, right?
Yeah.
And for us, or for a lot of purchases, it's time, opportunity, and, a matter of a couple $1,000s one way or the other.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've had to work on as an agent with my police background, and then also, being involved in real estate investments and those type of things where it's like, oh, that's not a big deal. Like, oh, this problem comes up and I'm like, oh, that's not a big deal. Like, we'll work through that. And but then I have to realize, well, it is a big deal for these clients. Like this is the first time that they've ever bought a home, or maybe this is, their forever home. Or they've never been presented with this problem before. So I have to kind of control myself and say, okay, I got to have a little bit more empathy, right? Saying, okay, like, we'll work through this. It's not a problem, but, and kind of talk through them a little bit more and rely on partners like you and others within the community that, partners that we work with to say, hey, can you give this client a call and, reassure them everything's going to be okay? Those type of things because, because I think, the more properties you buy, more transactions that you're involved in, as a police officer, the more stressful situations that I'm in, you kind of get
calloused.
Yeah. And so you kind of have to say, okay, like, no, this is an important purchase for them. This is once in a lifetime, possibly, or first time that they've ever signed onto a 30-year agreement. Yeah. And to them that just seems, daunting. Yeah. So we have to kind of slow down a little bit, I think.
Absolutely. And I was going to ask you, has your police background, because I could appreciate that that's allowed you to be very situationally aware. And although you're reading people in a little different way, it's not too probably dissimilar of flight or flight in real estate.
Yeah, depending on the client.
Depending on the client, they're either going to brawl or they're going to be submitted.
Yeah.
Has that helped you out, you think?
Yeah. I was talking to Gary and Wayne probably after the first year that I had my license, and I told him, I said, it's amazing the similarities between being a police officer and a real estate agent. Because it's down to 2 things. It's communication and psychology. Yeah. Communication is key over anything else. And, as a police officer, I wish we could change our name from police officers to problem solvers, right? Because 99% of the time we get called because there's a problem and we have to go solve it. Whether we have experience in that situation, whether we've dealt with that before, whether been an officer for 18 months or 18 years, I'm being called to go solve that problem as quickly, efficiently, and lawfully as possible. Without, I might only get 15 seconds of background information on my way there, and this could be a, domestic violence situation that's been brewing for 17 years.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
And so it's all about communicating, in law enforcement. It's all about communicating in real estate and reading your situation, reading the people that you're, communicating with and you're working with. And like I said, everyone is different. So every situation is different, but I feel that with my background dealing with highs and lows and stressful situations, if something were to come up during a transaction, I'm like, okay, well, we know what the problem is. What's our solutions? Let's figure out a solution and we'll work through it. It's not, with empathy, but it's not a big deal. We'll make it work. Or, one time, when you and I were working together and I get a call from a client, like, oh my God, the on the lending side of it, like these numbers, I'm freaking out. And I'm like, let me call Chris. I'll have him call you. And, because that's not my expertise, and I don't want to pretend, and I don't want to give any false information.
Yep.
So here, let's work with,
makes sense.
Let me call Chris, have him call you, and we'll work it out. Let's solve the problem. Right. And whether the problem is you need to buy a house, you need to sell your house during escrow, there's a gas leak or, whatever the case may be, we'll figure it out. We'll look through it, and we'll solve that problem, and we'll get to a resolution.
Absolutely. And I think everyone has an inherent built-in problem of you need to shelter some way, shape, or form, and that's where the majority of people like the whole indoor sheltering situation. Right. And so that's where I think it's important for people to understand, like you didn't choose this necessarily. Like, you're born into this society that likes to live indoors. In Northern Arizona has a pretty high necessity of that. Right. Yeah. And to where you have to make a decision. So you can either problem solve or you can procrastinate. And I think that's where I think right now, my thoughts that a lot of people need to kind of just face the problem. It's not a pretty one. Right. It's not like the easiest thing to solve right now, but to say, hey, if you just keep kind of procrastinating that problem solve and just go into the next lease and the next lease, or extend, right? One of my worst, like there's certain people that I just feel really, really bad for. One of these groups of people are like that perma renter. I don't know how many in these types of things of like perma renters. We're all here typically in like downtown or like really nice location. They're like, hey, the landlord was like charging me like $400 a month to live here in this downtown spot. It was amazing. I've been here for 14 years, and now they passed away, or family's going to sell it, or they're going to sell it, or like you had a good run. Yeah. But like, what would have happened if you just faced the music and not pressed the easy button? Right. 14 years ago or 20, like I have this perma renter who's like, man, I guess it was a good situation.
Yeah. Or hopefully you were paying attention over that time and trying to develop a game plan or putting money aside, because it's only getting more and more expensive. And yeah, I see a lot of people going back to, getting caught up in the national hysteria, right? Yeah. Of like the market's going to crash, or I'm just going to wait for the market to crash. I mean, if I had $1 for every time, I heard that since COVID, I would have a new vending machine. So, yeah. And it's like, if you would have, go back to it. You would have bought in 2020, you would have bought in 2021, you would have been in a really good position right now.
So go ahead.
But, the opportunity has to be right for everybody, and I think a lot of time people want what they necessarily can't have, and that puts them in a tough position. And so a lot of times you have to be honest with them and say, let's really look at the numbers. Let's really look at what you want, because buying a house might not be in your best interest, or you might have to face the music and move out of Flagstaff. Yeah. And that's not like something that necessarily a lot of realtors are going to advice that they're going to give,
But I think I was just going to pull this up if I can find it quick enough to where, let's see, I was visiting my paternal grandfather about a month ago, and I'll show you this here if I can find this. As we just talk about, I think that's where a lot of people just have to kind of break out of the mindset of what they think they need / deserve / want. And they kind of just have to be honest with themselves, right? And to say, so that same person that's been living, can I not find this here? It would have been great. If I get one, give one more.
Well, I think it's more frustrating too in the Flagstaff market.
Yes.
Where you can have an early professional in their career making $65,000 a year, and yet they still can't afford a house.
Yeah. So that's my paternal grandfather's living room. He's been in that house for probably like 60 years. Okay. That's the living room where he raised like 7 kids.
Yeah.
And so for those of you watch, like, you know, it's probably like I don't know, 400 square foot.
Well, it looks like a living room in a house that's maybe 1,200 square feet.
Yeah.
You know,
I think they're probably 12 to 1,500 square feet. Like small house, large yard. It's not like an acre. That's how they did it back in the day. They wanted their land for the planting, and he had a nice garden and everything. But that's I think is people need to just be real a little bit with what their goals are, and understanding that one thing's going to give, right? You can either like face the music now and have it's risk, and it doesn't feel great, all the time. But that's where it's always hindsight 2020, when all those same people that just want to feel comfortable at everything. It just needs to be right. And you're like, well, then that's when all of a sudden your bidding wars are just going to get chaotic this summer.
Right.
And all of a sudden, like, rates are down now, and now we're ready, and housing prices are, I don't know.
You can't compare yourself to someone who bought 15 years ago.
No.
Right. And I think there's a lot of comparison to that, where, we bought our house in 2008 in Ponderosa Trails. And when we bought our house coming from Michigan, I was like, I never thought I would spend this much on a house in my life.
Yep.
I think we paid $310,000, and I was like,
now everyone in Ponderosa Trails are like that. I have so many clients looking that would like literally get their firstborn for something under 6.
But when we bought in 2008, the market was going down. I mean, we were underwater in our house for probably 3 years.
Yeah.
And so after 4 years of being in your house, you're back to even. I mean, that wasn't a comfortable position to be in either. But, over time, it's a good value. And that's what I try to tell people. If you can get into Flagstaff, don't get into it unless you're in for the long haul. Yeah. Because that's where you're going to see a lot of your return on your investment is holding in Flagstaff, because we're so limited to the housing that we have here. That's why the prices are so high. And if you can buy into Flagstaff, I wouldn't try to do anything you could to hold that property for forever, because the value is going to be there, and you're going to get more in your long-term equity than anything else in terms of return on investment in Flagstaff, especially now with the interest rates, right?
Yep.
I mean, you're gone are the days of you're buying a house and you're automatically going to cash flow as a rental.
No, you have to be smarter right now. Mm-hmm. But the opportunity is still there.
It's still there, but it's not like it was even 2 years ago. No. And that's why so many of these houses got bought up. And I think that's why you're not seeing the inventory like we normally do, because so many people have so much equity. And I think Jim from Benchmark, the stat he put out where it was like 68% of people, homeowners, have 4% or less interest rate right now.
Yeah.
And so
in Arizona, I think I saw a stat that it's closer to like 80% in Arizona.
So people don't want to get out of that small monthly payment.
Yeah.
Even just go in the same exact house, maybe it's a better location or better, layout, whatever it is. I mean, you're looking at doubling your mortgage payment per month.
It definitely is. Yeah, I think people are going to have to, not to, and on negative notes too much. Like, no one's going to sell. Good luck. But no, I think it definitely is one of the big behavioral factors that will define the market for at least the next probably decade. Yeah. Right. I was saying that, a lot of people though, and that's what's interesting to me, is we had a big move up buyer wave hitting in like, when was this? So a big move up buyer wave in like 18, 19. Mm-hmm. And it was funny to me that I had all these folks that had done like low down payments. All of a sudden their equity had grown. They're coming in for their move up, and they're thinking, hey, I'm putting 20% down now. Like, I should get a lower payment, right? And I'm like, well, now house prices have gone up. You're moving up. So now the house price, like if you moved across the street,
right,
it would be like based on where prices and everything go, you'd be basically at like the same payment with a 20% down, much less you want now an extra bedroom, a bigger lot, whatever.
Yep.
And so I had to just kind of explain, I had like this dialed speech. I do this like several times a week on like, you are not moving up for financial reasons. You are moving up for lifestyle.
Yeah.
And what's inevitable that I've learned for better or for worse, again, with along with us being creatures that we like indoor shelter, that we also highly value lifestyle, right? Like people aren't buying, putting premiums on certain locations and certain finishes and certain fit if it wasn't for, a little bit of that keeping up with the Joneses and, or like saying, hey, this is what I am willing to spend more because I want my kids to grow up here, or I want that, proximity to downtown lifestyle, or right. It's really of like people, what do you want to spend your money on?
Right.
And how do you want to spend your time in your life?
Yeah. And I have those conversations with my clients because for me, I've found that the biggest factor for a lot of buyers in Flagstaff is location. From location, then it's house. And then from house, it's, the condition of the house, whether it needs some upgrades or it's been completely remodeled.
Sure.
Because location, I feel like location is very important, especially if you have kids, if you're taking them to school, activities, how close are you to, run to Walmart or Target to grab a couple groceries or a couple things. Yep. And that's where it was for us too. When we bought, we wanted to be in a neighborhood with, sidewalks and parks, and we wanted to be close to Walmart and the grocery store. Sure. And we want to be close to restaurants because we like going out.
Yeah.
And that was the most important for us. And so, what's the sacrifice, right? Like, are you willing to sacrifice more money per month to be in a better location, or is it to be in a bigger house? Is the bigger house a need, or is it a want? I think, again, a lot of that goes back to, social media, seeing what other people are doing, HGTV, all these new, beautiful homes and upgrades. And that's what people want. And rightfully so. But what are you willing to sacrifice to get that? And is that really important? Looking at your grandpa's house, like, that wasn't a necessity. It was more of, raising the family and having the bigger land, and, could care less of what the house really looked like. Not that it was a bad house.
Kick the kids outside. No, there probably hasn't been an update for like 20 years on some of that stuff. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Is where now it's, people are up, walking into houses that are beautifully done, and they're like, oh, this granite needs to be replaced. We're going to, new cabinets, all these bathrooms need to be redone, new flooring. And you're just like, man, like, okay, that's fine if you can afford it. But if you're really on that tipping point of, can I afford living in Flagstaff, or can I afford this house? You really need to take a step back and say, okay, well, is it more important to have, a fancy house and impress people, or am I more comfortable in having a home that's not as fancy, or maybe not in the best location, but I can still have money to do other things that are more, or just as important to me?
Yeah, I agree. I think if I was putting it out there, I think the people that will be the happiest right now in this market, that are the people that are, let me make it to three things, and you tell me what you think, is that can be truly honest with themselves about their housing needs. Number two, can be decisive within that reality. And number three, can be patient within those expectations, right? In the sense of saying, hey, this is the starter home. We are okay with that, right? This is not the forever home that we wish we could get right now, but we're going to own a home, and that's important for us. Or, hey, this is the right home and location. It's just, I'm going to have to be comfortable hating my kitchen for 3 to 5 years, right? But we'll get there, right? And I think it's so easy. And that's where, like, I'm super, super careful on things. And we did in the podcast talking about the Airbnb project. But when I started that and talking about, like, the very first home that I bought 13 years ago was an FHA, 3.5% down.
Yeah.
Like, old school cabinets and Formica countertops. And it's like, like we got to temper your expectations. Like that didn't happen overnight, right? Here we are then stepping up to that plate, and it was 13 years of experience and saving and working through things that I just think people need to know, like, hey, you can't just all of a sudden condense that.
Yeah, I think of the three that you mentioned, I think decisiveness is the most important. Okay. The clients that I've had that have mostly on the buyer side that have bought at any time frame over the last 3 years, they're always happy that they did. And because if you're constantly like, man, I want to sell, but I want to reach the peak of the market when I sell. And then when I buy, like I want to buy low. And, what if I sell and I can't buy or, we thought about buying, but, we just figured maybe now we want to wait till the market goes down a little bit. 3 years later, the market has not gone down. Now they regret making that decision and buying when they would have.
Yeah.
And they would have been happy to be in a house that needed some work, and that over the last 3 years they could have put in, a couple thousand here, a couple DIY projects there, and I think that's how you and I did it.
Yeah.
We bought our first, I was the same way. It was complete construction, gray. It hadn't been touched.
Yeah.
Was not the prettiest on the inside, but, over time you just, do a little bit here, a little bit there. And, that's where you're going to build your value. And it's the stability of being in a place and having that comfort. And, I think there's a lot of emotion that goes into buying a house.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of time, once you're happy with what you got and you get in there, you lose a lot of that emotion of little things, right? Like, oh, I don't like the cabinets. And then, a year later, you're like, I don't mind the cabinets. They're not that bad. It wasn't even that big of a deal. Or,
Yeah. And I think, hopefully I'm not tangenting too far on this. We have some really good notes here as we're working a wrap on it, to where I think it kind of comes down to just making stuff happen, right? Mm-hmm. Like, hey, I'm going to try this idea. I'm going to just make stuff happen. I've never done a dog poop business or escape room. Like, we're just going to learn and make stuff happen. And knowing that, I think inevitably there's this unknown that a lot of people feel uncomfortable with in real estate, and just know, like, you're going to have to be comfortable with a certain, do your due diligence as much as you can, respect and dial in with your experts, that you're just going to have to say, hey, Eric, I don't know if this is necessarily the best investment, but I'm looking at you. You're saying this is a go opportunity, that you don't think there's massively, we can't predict the future for people, right? We can only work within the realm of the knowledge that we have, but to be able to say, yeah, I trust you, and to make this happen. But then I think it's just really powerful to even continue that, just make things happen, to where, like, how many times where it's like, yeah, you could knock on, and not to lose business for everybody, but to talk about the hustle, like, yeah, you could knock on the front door of, a contractor and say, yeah, I want this beautiful kitchen and I want it now. And like, you can get that. You can get anything. But to say, oh, like, we just can't afford that right now. But to say, what happens when you have community around you, and all of a sudden, and if you're looking out for the things and you have good things go, what am I trying to say is that you're putting it out there in the ether of, we want to do the kitchen. And someone says, hey, we're getting rid of these cabinets, or I know how to paint cabinets, or that's what we've seen really work well for us as well, of like, I didn't know how to tile, but I'm asking enough people on YouTube, right? And like, you figure it out, and then you have buddies down there doing it with you. And then so there's community too to this.
Absolutely.
Right. That we've had people helping us with, just be careful when you invite the in-laws, because you're going to lose part of your thumb. I love you, Pam Paul. But that's where, there's value to this of saying, hey, you can make it happen. Don't just think like, this is the dream and that's the only gate. Right. I just need more money, or I need to make more money. I think a lot of people that do that to themselves and kind of think, woe is me, and victimize themselves in this market, will do very poorly.
Yeah. And I think that goes most importantly to, on the real estate side, work with people or find people that you trust.
Yeah.
Right. Find an agent that you can have these conversations with, that you feel comfortable with, that you feel is going to be on your side. It's not always the realtor with the most advertisements that you see out there that's going to be the best agent for you. Right. I was surprised when I got into real estate and I'm seeing, realtors spending $5,000, $10,000 a month just to generate leads. And I'm like, that's crazy. They must be doing great. Well, then you find out, it just puts their ad everywhere. And if somebody reaches out to them, they might get a 5-minute conversation with that realtor. But after that, they're working with assistants. They're never even working with this person who's supposed to have all this expertise. And not to say that everyone that advertises everywhere is not in it for their clients, but there's a lot of that out there. Yeah. So find someone that you do trust, that you're comfortable in talking with, and who you feels is going to be, in your best interest. And then, that person has connections. That person has you know what I mean? And so they have a community and networking of people. And I didn't realize one of the biggest eye openers for me getting my real estate license was the importance of working with a local lender. I never even really kind of thought about that, but, understanding that and then working with local lenders like you and others in Flagstaff, it's night and day difference than working with some national lender who just puts out these random interest rates, because for me, that's, like I said, that's not my expertise. So I don't want to tell my clients, go with the lowest rate or, and I've seen with working with local lenders where they might give an initial cost of closing and these type of things. And then, I have that client reach out to a national lender and they're like, oh, we can do it for such and such cheaper. It's $5,000 cheaper. And then I sit down with that local lender and they're like, okay, well, they have their appraisal fee at $75.
Yeah.
They have, you're saying your home inspection is going to be $50. You know what I mean? And so they're baking in all these just basic numbers that they throw out there, not knowing what the actual local market is. And then if there is questions or issues, I can say, let me text Chris. Let me call Chris, and you can call them, or you can say, hey, let's meet up tomorrow for coffee. We'll go through all this together. And that comfort is there for them. That's huge. You got to have people that you trust and that are, know what's going on locally, because there's a lot of things just thrown out there on advertisements and marketing that it's just not true. And that's just kind of to reel you in to be another number rather than, hey, I'm here locally too. So, I'm not going to do you bad because we're probably going to see each other at Safeway and then, at the soccer game or whatever, because Flagstaff is a close-knit community. And so, we want what's best for our clients.
Exactly. Nope. Couldn't have said it better. And I just think that, if you're in it to make a sale, whether they are there's plenty of local people that are in it just for a sale and a closing, versus if you're in it for the person, for the mid and short term, long term goals, those things. That's where it sounds cliche and again, kumbaya, right, it does, but it's a matter of saying, I've seen people lose a ton of money or gain a ton of money by having someone ask. It's like that. What is it? Sorry, there's this analogy. I don't know if this is a true story, but I'll try and summarize real quick here of like the boat repair, like this big, large ship repairman. And this company had this large vessel that they spent tons of money trying to fix and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. And they called the expert mechanic, who was super expensive. And he spent just throw out like $50,000 to have this guy come out, and he spent 5 minutes and fixed it. Yeah. And like, wait, like that's not our money's worth. That's not the, he's like, no. Like $5 or you gave me like, $100 for the 5 minutes. And then you gave me the other like 49,950 or whatever, right? For my 20 years of experience to be able to do it like that. Right. And it's, I think that's the key, is saying that when the realtor or the lender or the person that knew them asked that right question, that made all the difference in either the financial direction or this house versus that house that they would have been moving up from or dissatisfied with or something. Right. Like, it's like, that's where it's not in all the little paperwork that Eric's going to be like better in all ways, right? Yeah. A lot of people do the same things and the same paperwork. It's like that one or two steps or questions, and the way they connect is where all the difference happens, in my opinion.
Yeah. And not to put, a selfish plug out there for me, but
no, selfish plug. This is,
but, for me, like I'm a police officer, so that's my career.
Yeah.
And I love doing real estate. I love helping people out because that's just something that I'm just passionate about.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's not always about the sale, so I don't need to make a sale to pay my bills, not to sound, arrogant or
sure.
But,
yeah.
So for me, it's not always like close the deal. It's like, let's think about this, right? Let's think about some things that now that I got to know you and your family that might be concerns, whether it's from my just experience in law enforcement or it's my experience in real estate. Maybe it's best for you to rent for another year.
Yeah.
Right. And then I might lose that client and never make that deal. But, for me, I just can't, sell people into something that I know might not be the best for them or at least what they want just because I haven't closed a deal in 6 months and now I need to pay my bills. You know what I mean? That's got to be
Exactly.
That's got to be a stressful situation.
Yeah.
And I see it out there sometimes where it's not always about what's best for the client. And so that brings a comfort to me because I've never been, prior to real estate in kind of a sales position.
Sure.
So I'm still trying to learn, my niche in that and my comfort level in doing sales.
Yeah.
But for me, like, I feel like the integrity has to be there because, I'm sure for you too, like
absolutely,
you would hate to just close a bunch of deals and then come to find out you didn't do what was best for your clients. And now, it's coming back to haunt you or haunt them. And now you put them in a vulnerable position.
Yeah. And that's where we don't, at this point in time, and we've done different strategies and chase market in different ways, but 50% of my business is past client or close client, and 10%, I'm trying to get out of the word past, and 10% is just like ancillary friends, kind of friends and family, and then another 40% is my realtor relationships. And that to me then says, if I don't do a good job,
right,
I wouldn't have been doing this for the last 14 years on this mountain.
Yeah.
Right. Is that's your lifeblood, is working with integrity.
Yeah. Well, it's not like Phoenix or these large markets where you can do some bad deals. And
I'm going to go over to this zip code.
Yeah. Like I said, you're going to meet these people,
Yeah.
At different events and different places throughout town. And that means a lot.
Exactly.
I think for people to know that they were treated well and, we're always looking out for their best interest, especially when, these are life-changing purchases for them and life commitments at times. I don't know.
I love it. Is that your motto? Eric Greenwald, where real estate meets integrity?
I like it.
Let's do it.
Maybe.
All right. Well, we'll wrap this up here. Thank you so much, Eric.
Yeah.
We appreciate
you having me. It's fun. And, I appreciate your podcast. You put out some good information.
Thank you.
So, I recommend everyone to follow along, subscribe, like the video, right?
I need to see that stuff more. Awesome. Appreciate it, Eric. Give Eric a call, guys. Thanks.